I think is kind of okay. I'm still working on this. I'm still trying to figure out how it goes. I had to click on go live in order for this to, I think, officially go live. They make you use all this software to do this thing, and I actually have to then mute myself so I don't hear myself from 15 seconds ago talking into my own ears as I talk. This can't be right. This can't be the right way to do things. On the other hand, I have expanded out so I am a full I'm a full screen right now. So thank you. I don't know how accurate the concurrent viewers are. If there's two of you or if there's more, but the two of you, thank you. So I'm going to say hello here on the chat. And then in a few seconds, you'll be hearing that I've said hello in the chat. I don't know how to adjust it so it's done in any kind of real time. Check the video resolution. The current resolution is something, which is not optimal. Let's see. Camera resolution. Well, you know what? I'm just gonna go with suboptimal for now because we're already down this road. And in this particular case, that'll just have to do because at least I'm now covering a full screen, which I wasn't before. Isn't housekeeping fascinating? They make you use this program called this like other piece of software called OBS, and I just think it's an unfortunate branding decision for that company to say bullshit for the name of the company. Maybe it's on purpose. I don't know. I am not a video software namer. Anyway, so thank you for being with us. Few things that are happening. Our show with Open Mike Eagle is out in the open, and Mike is somebody who I got to know years ago when we needed a musical guest for the show Wits that I was hosting, and we saw that Mike had been the RA, the residence hall advisor in college for Hannibal Buress, who we had already booked on the show. So we thought that might be fun. Just get Hannibal Buress's RA in here to do some rapping. And then we listened to Mike's music, and it was incredibly fascinating and deep and cerebral. And so I've gotten to know him since then. He was on Wits a few times. I hosted a show called Conversation Parade with Mike, and then he had been on Hilarious World over at the old place. And Mike runs deep. He grew up in the projects in South Side of Chicago, where he was mostly not allowed to go outside. That's sort of the prelude to the conversation we had here on Depresh Mode. His grandparents feared for his life. They were raising him and his sister, and they didn't let them go outside. They had to stay inside, so Mike stayed in and watched a lot of MTV, a lot of like white music on MTV, of which They Might Be Giants was his favorite, still his favorite group to this day. So it's just fascinating, like almost like an experiment was conducted in Mike's case. So and he'd been through a lot of anxiety. He'd been through a lot of like uneasiness about where home was going to be. He lost his housing in college, which had a big effect on him. Presumably not when he was an RA for Hannibal. And as I talked about in the show, his whole life kind of fell apart recently. His show on Comedy Central was canceled, and his marriage fell apart. There's a custody issue going on. They put it all in his latest record. And full screen is, thank you, Sherry. And what I found, I like interviewing people multiple times because I think you can dig deeper each time you do. And I knew that Mike had a degree in psychology and had completed at least some of graduate school in psychology as well. And you hear me in this episode of the show say, "Oh shit, that's what all your music's about, isn't it?" Like, I've been listening to Mike's music for years, and it finally kind of all came around to psychology when he talked about just being fascinated by how minds work and the study of how thinking worked. And it really hit home for me too, because as I do these interviews, as I talk to people about these issues, like I care about who I'm interviewing as a person, as a human being. I have a sympathetic and at times empathetic reaction to them. If they're a friend, even more so. But part of what really makes it interesting for me, and what makes a show like Hidden Brain interesting, some of these other shows, is like, oh, why did the character do that? Like, so here's this character and here's the decision they make. Why did that happen? What can I dig into to fully explain how we get from point A to point B? Um, and I was really inspired also in this episode by Mike's approach to creating stuff. I have been hitting walls during COVID. I mean, I started this show, which I think is a creative accomplishment, but there's been some books I've started and not finished. There's been a bunch of other things. And yes, David, I'm planning to continue to have these. And Mike said, well, I just have to do it. I just have to keep going, like he doesn't give himself the choice, which is when I've done exercise programs, it's the only time they've ever worked, is when I don't give myself the option of getting out of it somehow. So hope you liked Mike's show, and let me know if you have any questions on that, or the Mike episode. There's also an article out in Vulture today about me and this and the show. And so that it's written by Nick Qua, who covers the podcasting industry. So it's a little bit about industry and intellectual property and the not getting of intellectual property from my former employer. But it's mostly too about ownership, which is, as you know, has been a big thing for me, that I can make these shows, and once I've created them, I own them. So if this needs to get turned in, if these interviews want to become animated specials, I'm in control of that. If they want to be a book, or if they want to be a TV show, that's all built in. So and that's really about sort of protecting it for the team, for the audience, and me. I've talked about this before, and I'm going to be talking about it more in the coming weeks, because we have our funding drive coming up. But I really am approaching this like we're all a team talking about these issues. I just happen to be the one on the microphone most of the time. So read that article if you like. Next week we have Jenny Lawson. If you haven't read any of Jenny Lawson's books, start doing so. She's got a new book out called Broken, and so as soon as we heard that she had a new book coming out, we got her on the show. We got her into the flow of things. So that's next week, talking about how she, as one of the most nervous and anxious and sort of self-isolating people I know, has started a bookstore, which seems like a bold choice for an agoraphobic person. But she talks about how it's a safe space, and that's why she likes doing it. So that's coming up. Next month is the Max Fund Drive, the Maximum Fund Drive, Max Fund Drive. And we'll be getting into more stuff about supporting the show. Then I'm kind of took my foot off the pedal on the fundraising up until then. But it's gonna be good. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to making the case for the show. Coming up the week after Jenny is going to be a show about the trauma of COVID, which I'm really looking forward to. Sherry's reading Jenny Lawson's book. Great. So it's a show where I talk with Ken Duckworth, who is the medical director for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I talked to a therapist in Massachusetts who's seen a lot of patients. and we talk about trauma and what trauma has historically meant during a pandemic, what the whether the thing that we're all going through now is a collective trauma, what we know about collective traumas, how we can't even really assess the full impact and damage of a trauma until after it is completed, and the new one, the current one, the COVID one, is not complete. So we don't even know what we're up against. But I was just doing an interview about about that, and the host asked me, well, what do we have going for us? What do we have as an advantage in the trauma yet to come, and the you know the magnitude of the crisis that our brains couldn't process, right? So that's what becomes trauma. It's impossible to process. You stuff it away, it emerges in all sorts of weird relationship issues, sometimes substance issues, a variety of forms. And I said, what we have going for us more than any other people in history who have gone through something huge is that we have more knowledge and we have more openness than has ever been had before. We are, in American culture, we are less stigmatized than we've ever been. We have a long ways to go, but things are better than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago. So we have that going for us. And I think the more we can arm ourselves with knowledge and with kindness towards each other, then the better off I think we're going to be. Things are going to be brutal in a different way than they are now. This is I'm also giving a speech coming up next week on this topic. And I was just thinking, leave it to the depressed guy to say, oh, the vaccines are out. And now the numbers are starting to go down. And soon we'll reach herd immunity. We're going to get back to at least the new normal, if not the old normal. Leave it to the depressed guy to say, oh yeah, but that's when the real problems start. But that's when some new problems are going to start. So that's it for now. I think I'll bid adieu. So Jenny Lawson next week. Read that book if you get a chance. Read any of her books, but especially the new one. There's some great talk on her episode about TMS, the transmagnetic therapy thing where you, it's like a woodpecker pecks at your head with a magnet, and you do that for 40 days, and then a third of people are completely cured of depression after having that treatment. A third are mildly cured. A third are unaffected. So it's a fascinating section in the book and in the interview. I hope you'll enjoy that. And Furiously Happy. Yes, that is a good point. That's a good book, I should say. I talked to her on my old show. And you could go back and listen to that chat too. But I think the new one is the one that's coming out next week is infinitely more revealing. So, okay, well, we'll check in next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll do it again 1 p.m. next week to talk about Jenny Lawson. So I'm declaring that. I'll declare that on social media, but I'm declaring it now, 1 p.m. Central, whatever that is, wherever you are. And Jenny